What's going on, everyone? I'm just a typical, average American here today to react and learn about how Canadians really feel about the United States. That's right, tell me how you really feel. Oh boy, I am both nervous and yet oddly curious about this topic. Today we're going to look at a Reddit discussion where Canadians answered the question, how do you really feel about the United States? And I'm pretty curious about what kind of answers we're going to get. Most Americans that I have met either have a positive or a neutral viewpoint of Canada. I think that's absolutely true. I actually think that's very accurate. I think most Americans have either a pretty good opinion of Canada or no opinion at all. Like, probably because, basically because Americans don't know that much about Canada. Therefore, a lot of Americans just have no opinion either way, just kind of a general neutral or positive kind of feeling towards Canada. I think that's very fair to say. Canada has a culture of being our laid back, easygoing, friendly neighbor. That's true. A lot of Americans would agree with that. Laid back, easygoing, friendly neighbor to the north. With this in mind, I am curious to hear your perspective on us, whatever it may be. What is your perspective, Canadians, on the United States? That is our perspective. Generally positive, I agree, towards Canada, on average. Let's hear from some Canadians here. When I meet Americans, I like them. Oh, and they're in general really helpful and kind when I'm traveling there. Oh, I find them to be warm people. Hey, this is kind of nice. Wait a minute, I don't know what I was afraid of. This is not, thank you. I'm acting like this Canadian is talking to me or something. Thank you, I'll take it. Okay, so this Canadian, their specific anecdotal experience, they have had good experiences with Americans, find them to be warm people. I agree. I think Americans are in general pretty friendly. Maybe, like, compared to some countries, Americans can be considered annoyingly friendly. And not just friendly, but maybe like over opinionated, little outspoken, maybe overconfident. That can even come across. We're friendly, and then we kind of push it a little past that. I think that's very fair to say. However, I would still find they don't realize there's an entire world outside of their country that's completely different from them, and that's pretty naive. That is really, really, really accurate. I can say this as an American. That is so true. It's crazy how Americans do not know anything about the rest of the world. This is coming from, myself, an American. I have to make a concerted effort to even learn about, cultures like Canada outside of the United States. And I'm an adult learning a lot of this stuff for the very first time. Just imagine, most Americans aren't doing stuff like this on the internet, so most Americans, and myself for the longest time, I don't know what it is. We just don't know that much about the rest of the world. We really focus on stuff going on here in the United States. It's a kind of a, never-ending loop where we start thinking we do everything the best, all the cool stuff is here, we're the coolest, we have all the cool stuff, we make all the important decisions, like we are a model for the rest of the world to look upon and admire. And you can get almost caught in that cycle of thinking when you don't expand your brain and mind to the possibilities and cultures outside of the United States. That can definitely happen. I feel like America is a victim of its own success. Americans are a victim of America's success. America has been very successful, and I think over time that has produced generations of Americans that think everything they need to know or care about is right here, and that they don't have anything to learn from the rest of the world, which is a grave mistake. So yes, that's a really long-winded rant to agree with. A lot of Americans don't realize there's a world outside of America that's different and a lot to learn from. I also think that a lot of Americans, compared to people from other countries, we don't tend to travel outside of the United States very much. The United States is so gigantic. 50 different states almost feel like 50 different countries at sometimes. There's so much stuff here in America that Americans don't tend to travel outside of the United States that much and experience other cultures. I think different countries and people from around the world, other parts of the world, tend to travel a bit more and have a passport and vacation somewhere and learn stuff. And Americans just tend to stay in America a lot and not learn a lot of this stuff. So we might be naive. I think there's a lot of truth to that. I think it's because their media takes over everything and they're the center of the world. A lot of them maybe don't leave, so they just don't know. Exactly. Sure. Media, definitely. I mean, our media just focuses on American issues and exacerbates a lot of those issues. A lot of us don't leave the country, that's true. Their fatty foods are so cheap and come in huge quantities. Wait a minute. How? They just had to throw that in there randomly. I don't know what that had to do with how ignorant and naive and unworldly we are. Then you just gotta throw in, and Americans are all disgusting, unhealthy creatures with our fatty foods. That's true. That's true, and I love it. But as an American, I definitely acknowledge, like, I could be healthier as well. I do partake in a lot of the fatty foods, like really artificial snacks and foods here in America, and huge portion sizes. It's all true, and kind of difficult to get away from when you're living it, I have to say, I live in Canada, and it's bad here, but the US is on steroids. Okay, Canada may have its problems, but the US has all these problems in spades, like we're on steroids with these problems. Okay, that's all fair. No, I said I was a bit nervous about some of these criticisms that I knew were coming. Actually, the first thing was kind of a compliment, and then it very graciously, in Canadian fashion, it started with some compliments and slowly transitioned into heartbreaking, traumatic insults, which, if there's any way to go about it, that's a good way. Thank you. But I think it's good to have a bit of self-reflection, introspection. Let's have some more introspection with some more thoughts on what Canadians really feel about the United States. Opinions of the US tend to be fairly mixed here in Canada. There's a small minority of people who really love the US. Okay. A small minority of people who really hate the US, and the majority of people who fall somewhere in between. Funny enough, I could almost use that to describe the United States population. Small minority of people in the US who love the US, small amount that hate it here in the US, and a lot of Americans just kind of fall in between. And that makes a lot of sense to me that the same would be for Canadians. Like, there's reasons to not like the US. There's reasons to like it. It doesn't all have to be like a bash party against the US. There's some good stuff we do. Yeah, and I think logically, the majority of people just fall in between. Personally, I have a positive view of the US. Thank you, BG Tonap. Thank you. That's very nice. What else do we have here? I disagree with a lot of what the United States stands for in terms of military, gun control, abortion. This obviously varies by region. Very true. That's kind of important to acknowledge. Like, again, what I was alluding to is you can really choose in the United States depending on your own, what kind of climate you want to live in, temperature, what kind of political environment you want to live in, ideological surroundings, and what kind of people you want to live amongst. You can have your pick of it in the United States, and I actually kind of appreciate that about the United States. So it does vary by region. What I think Americans unfairly get way too much hate online. Okay, there are bad eggs in any country, including Canada. No, what? Canada! How could you? There's bad eggs in Canada as well. Actually, I'm just kidding. Of course, we're all just human beings. Human beings are flawed. And even in Canada, I'm sad to say. But Americans are so often seen as being embodied by their worst, which is a shame. Okay, I think that's a nice point that this person brings up. There probably is a lot of like anti-Americanism, especially like in this age of internet and online and stuff, where people just anonymously will bash whatever they want. There definitely feels like there can be a lot of like anti-American sentiment, which, don't get me wrong, a lot of it is totally valid and justified. Valid criticisms. But sometimes all Americans are kind of embodied by what this person says, embodied by the worst of Americans, which is a shame. That's true. There have been many amazing Americans that have done incredible things. To perceive them all as uneducated or uncultured is ridiculous. That being said, oh, here it comes. I don't like how influenced Canada is by America. They don't like how influenced by America Canada is. Would Canadians say Canada is very influenced by America? And in what ways? I know America has like a big entertainment industry. I'm sure Canadians consume a lot of American entertainment and stuff like that, but do Canadians consume a lot of American culture as well? Maybe through the entertainment, maybe through the news? That's an interesting point. It's not their fault. It just happens with having a country of their scale as Canada's next door neighbor. I'm both happy to have Americans as our brothers, while also wanting to do our own thing as Canadians. I think Canadians really do their own thing, like as an American. But I could definitely see as a Canadian, because, America on a global scale, like it's undeniable, America is very gigantic. At the risk of sounding arrogant, America is pretty important, like economically on a global scale. So I could see from Canada's point of view, like living next to this giant thing that is America, it can be a good thing, it can be an annoying thing. But as an American, I happen to think Canada very much has its own identity and its own way of life and culture, and yeah. So it's interesting to hear from Canadians here that they're happy to have Americans as brothers, and also wanting Canada to do its own thing. Interesting. They are fun, but you can always spot them abroad. Okay. or can you always hear them? You can I feel like Americans, like, we're talking about stereotypes of Americans on vacation somewhere abroad. When we finally do get outside of our American bubble, the other bad thing is Americans go abroad and then act like it's America. Like, a lot of Americans don't respect or learn about the local culture or customs. So you have loud, annoying Americans, like, violating every social norm of the place they're visiting. So yes, I've heard this before. You can spot Americans abroad. That's funny. True. I love the country, but I can't stand the scene. Leonard Cohen. Oh, this is a quote? I love the country, but can't stand the scene. Love, what does that mean exactly? He loves the country of America, but can't stand the scene. The scene would be what? Like the actual nitty gritty, like our politics, some of our way of life, some of our ideology, some of our like culture. Whereas, in general, Americans are fine, but there's some details of American culture that you can complain about. That's my interpretation. Salut. I find that Americans are overall very much similar to English Canadians. English Canadians. What is an English Canadian? I guess not a French Canadian, but everyone else an English Canadian? Okay. I find Americans are nice, warm, optimistic, chatty. I like Americans generally. See, this is nice. It's nice to actually hear some comments here from Canadians that are like both criticisms, but also some friendly, like, genuine thoughts, like positive thoughts of like, yeah, in my personal experiences, Americans are nice. I think that's true. I think you can say that about Americans and honestly people in general around the world. People are good. A person, an individual person is usually pretty good, pretty reasonable when you interact with them, like face to face. An individual American is good. Sometimes the collective hive mind of Americans can be bad. That, if that makes any sense. American politics is at the opposite of my values in some aspects. Why do some people want assault rifles? Why would some people need to shoot someone at 400 meters away? Self-defense? Americans seem more individualistic, while I prefer the collectivist approach. Well, this has come up in other videos that I've done. Americans' obsession with gun ownership, which I do agree it's insane how easy it is to get a gun here in America. Way too easy. But I guess the American part of me, like, at least understands some of some Americans' reasoning for guns. I mean, at its core, it's supposed to be self-defense. And at a deeper core, it was always meant to be, well, back in the day when America was founded, we needed, like, our citizens to be armed in case we had to go to war again. Or if we had to fight against our own government and overthrow them, which is literally how America was founded, overthrowing the British government. That's how we were made. So back in the day, when after that happened, that was right on the tip of Americans' minds, and we were like, okay, in our Constitution, we're going to write that everyone has the right to bear arms. So in case this whole thing ever happens again, our citizens have guns, and we can overthrow whatever oppressive government is in power. That was like the ye olde day thought. But nowadays, back then, it took 12 minutes to reload your gun, and it probably shot like 200 feet. So that's way different than today. We have the same laws, but totally different technology today. Now the guns shoot, 100 rounds in 10 seconds, can hit you from a quarter mile away. It's way, 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 way different today, and the laws should reflect that. I agree. And this thought here. Americans seem more individualistic, while I prefer the collectivist approach. Totally agree with this. I think that's a really, really good observation. I think as a culture, as Americans, we are taught to be, look out for yourself, hustle, grind, do what you have to do to succeed. Watch out for yourself because no one else is gonna. That's like an American thing, like that, a culture of that. And it's a shame because I think some of the community collectivist approach, like they're talking about, is a really beautiful thing and kind of the point of living in a country or any kind of, town or city or community is watching out for each other. And that can be a beautiful thing about life. And in America, it's definitely true. We're taught to be a bit more individualistic. We always reward the kid who comes in first place. Second place is the first to lose. First place only. Good job. That kind of mentality is very, very, very strong in America. So I agree with this. I actually think that thought is more spot on than you even realize. I like American movies and video games. You're my favorite neighbor. Very nice. That was really, really interesting. These comments from Canadians, I really appreciate getting to look through these. How Canadians really feel about the United States. I get a little nervous reading these because I feel like they're going to be negative. But a lot of these were actually kind of positive. Some of them were very positive. And even the negative stuff is just good. It's good to talk about, your faults and to be introspective. That's a good thing. It's not good to pretend like everything's perfect. And America's definitely not perfect. But it's not that bad either. That's kind of what I got out of this whole discussion, along with a lot of funny stuff as well. So I actually quite enjoyed this quite a bit. So anyway, if you enjoyed this as well, feel free to give this video a like or leave a comment, perhaps with how you really feel as a Canadian, how you really feel about the United States, or if you agreed with any of the comments or analysis here today that I was talking about, or if you disagree or agree with it. And if you're interested in more videos like this, me reacting to Canada and Canadian culture, feel free to subscribe for more. And until then, thanks for watching, and see you next time.